All right, welcome to Little Pod That Could. My guest today is Mike Gioseffi. He's the host of the Sports Card Nonsense podcast. Now, it says it's Spotify original, but it is on all platforms, right? I looked at Apple today and I was able to find it. But it is
yeah.
a Spotify original.
You got it, yeah. Apple, iTunes, it's everywhere. But Spotify original, they write the checks, so that's who we put on the show.
Okay, and I wanted to say beforehand, I am a proud member of the JG Mafia. Shout out to our guy Jesse.
Are you over 6 feet tall? Is that where this is coming from?
No, not. I just, I'm stand up for the guy that always gets picked on.
Oh, brother. I like it. He's becoming a cult leader, man. I'm telling you.
I know.
He went from the guy getting dumped on, and now he's taking over the world. He allows me to be on the show still, so I'm excited.
Yeah, and that's where I wanted to start. I mean, because like we were talking about before we started recording, you literally are like what every person who ever starts a podcast or gets on TikTok or that's what they dream of. Like you start something that you care about and that you're interested in, and then all of a sudden you're able to do it. You were doing card stuff full time, but to also now have this other platform where you can talk about cards and have Spotify write you checks, that's pretty insane.
Yeah, unexpected too, no question.
How did that start? I mean, because you started doing like YouTube and right?
So I was breaking cards full time, opening packs and everything, boxes online for people, and the business just blew up over a couple of years, got crazy successful, and then I just felt back in August, it's one of those things, it was fun, and we had a great time doing it, but it's like, man, you're up till, the days when you're working, I mean, we got such a strong following, like, hey, I'll be available till 10 at night, and then you've got guys just messaging and in the room, 100 people watching and chatting, you end up working till 4 or 5 in the morning. And it's like, I've always been a family first type of guy, and my wife was like, hey, this has been great, but at some point, where's the end game? So sold the company. I stayed on as a minority owner of the LLC, the breaking company. But then I was like, I just like talking and going live and messing around with it, and there's so many hacks in this space doing it. Man, card guys, there's just so many like just used car salesman types that come on here and just give crap advice. So I was like, I just want to have fun and do it. So we started on Facebook Live probably in September. And then we started actually, making a push for like YouTube. That's when we brought Jesse on board. That's my cousin. I was like, hey, you're a tech guy. He knows how to do that. I said, I'd like to actually make a bit of a play at this. Like, let's make this sound like it's supposed to sound and look how it's supposed to look. And so about November, we started that and just started making shows on our own. So yeah, about November though.
So not even that long. It's not like you've been grinding away 100 views for 10 years and then all of a sudden you blew up. Like this is like it's all happening kind of fast.
Yeah, I think we had put out maybe 6 episodes. We're doing like one a week because to cut all the sound up and all the video, Jesse's got a big time job on his own. Obviously neither one of us are making money doing this. So which I still get my checks from the other stuff. I have a couple businesses, so we're both fine financially, but I was like, this dude's not going to put 20 hours a week into a show. He's got a family and everything to support. And then randomly on Instagram, I think we had like, 600 followers. We had just set everything up. We got a direct message from Chris Vernon, who's on like Grind City Media, and he's on The Ringer with us. Vernon's an awesome dude. I knew Chris just from his Memphis Grizzlies stuff. He just messaged. He's like, hey, I want to talk to you guys. And we thought it was a joke. And then we saw the blue check mark, and it just kind of spiraled from there.
Wow. Now, you said you got into the game just breaking stuff, what'd you say, 6 years ago?
Yeah, so 5 years. So I've been doing it for 8 to 10 years, but about 5 or 6 years ago, went full-time. Got rid of the construction, just all cards, total, everything.
And so were you, as a kid, did you collect, or?
Yep.
Okay. And so then you just kind of got back in, but you got back into it before it was hot again. It was...
Yeah. So So as a kid, I've got an older brother, 7 years older than me. So we were just, typical kids back in the, early 90s, going to card shows, messing around, having fun at the local card shop. As I grew up, kind of got out of it. When I got married, I actually sold off the rest of my cards in '06 to buy the engagement ring. And I hadn't messed with that box in years anyway, so it didn't matter. And then, 2012... I just kind of was like, hey, we've got a little bit extra money, a couple $100. It'd be cool to buy some cards and whatever. And just kind of started doing things on the small scale, like buying and flipping and just like a side hustle. And then a random guy on Craigslist posted this collection here in Tennessee. I mean, the collection back then even was probably worth. I mean, he literally told us like somebody could offer me $1 million cash. I'd just laugh him out of the door. and he was serious. Like, this dude's collection was unbelievable. But he let me go through and pick out a whole box of stuff, and we spent $4,500 on it, which was every dime we had in 2012 or 2011. And that was what kind of got me going again, just like the whole buying and flipping and having fun doing it. So,
Wow. Okay, and so then Chris Vernon hits you up and says, does he immediately pitch, hey, we like your podcast, we think we want to do something together?
Dude, Chris was awesome. Like I said, I'd never spoken to Chris, obviously, but I'd seen him on TV, and I've heard his radio show. It's not that far from me here in Memphis. And I knew he was a big Ja Morant guy, which I love Morant. So, again, once we were like, hey, this isn't a joke, he was like, hey, I work for The Ringer, which I didn't know that side of things. Of course, The Ringer got bought up by Spotify. And he's like, the guy who runs it, Bill Simmons, would like to talk to you. Well, I'm a Boston guy. I've known Simmons for stuff for, since I was a kid. Like, it was awesome. Like, he used to write in, like, some of the Boston papers and just everything. And that was it. Like, Bill called us that night. I don't know if I'm supposed to call him Bill or Mr. Simmons. I don't want to get
Sure.
We'll call him Mr. Simmons. No, but yeah, Bill called me that night. He's like, hey, let's set something up. We like the idea. He's big into the card space anyways, and he was just kind of seeing how the market was going. And that was it. Like, that, they were like, hey, we think we could do this. And the best part is, you come on and do the pod, you do the research, you do all that, but we'll take care of the production side, which was huge for me because I'm useless. So
yeah, me too. And that's the hardest part. Like, I love this side of it, like talking, like shit, you know. But then it's like, look at Final Cut Pro. I'm like, oof, okay, I guess brutal. I need to learn that. Yeah. So that is awesome. And the other part that's tough is booking the guests. Like, I mean, you were super cool. Like, I mean, yeah, let's do it. I'm like, geez, because. And that's probably, I don't know how you were having guests beforehand, but like booking guests is
even now it's tough. And I name drop everybody I can. I'm like, hey, I work for The Ringer. We're on the Spotify channel. Bill Simmons is my uncle. Like, can you come on?
Yeah.
And even that, I will say this: we had been blowing up Gary V's DMs and stuff across all social when we were doing our own thing.
Okay.
But that was kind of cool. So on Twitter, again, once we started getting posted up by The Ringer, I just started tagging Gary V and everything. So I was like, I don't. To me, it don't matter. Like, if you hustle enough, maybe somebody will get annoyed and be like, fine, I'll come on, leave me alone. So he came on. That's how we got him. We've got some pretty cool guests that way. Bill's come on the show a few times now. But we just try. Even now, it is super difficult because we're such a new show. Like, The Ringer's huge, but we're the little brother on there, little cousin on there still.
Yeah, well, and it was cool too because I mean, like, Gary V is just such a great communicator. He's like using your guys' names. I felt like he's known these guys forever. I mean, it's just and you guys, I've been surprised for how new you are. Like, you guys do I felt like you came out of the gate. Like, I was interested in the show right away, and I'm not, I'm like a marginal. I have a couple cards I kind of want to show you and see what you think, but I'm not like, I haven't been in the space since I was a kid. So, I was kind of like, well, would I really be interested in that? But right away, I thought your guys' chemistry was good, and I thought, you guys were bringing on interesting people. I liked the PSA guy and the HGA guy. I thought all that stuff those interviews were really interesting. It kind of helped me feel like, okay, I'm understanding the space a little more, because I feel like there's a lot of people in my shoes right now that have collections from when they were kids, but now they're like, I don't know what to do. The market's hot. I know the market's hot, but I don't even know what to do.
Yeah, so that's why we set up the website too, because I was like, man, we're getting the same questions, which are all good questions. But I was like, just build out a cheap website, and then I literally just hit up friends that I've been doing and that I still do business with, like the guys I send stuff to grade with. I was like, well, do me a favor, just come on the website. Like, that way when people have questions, they can go to you. Or guys I use to consign, like, hey, hit up these guys, they'll take care of your consignment needs. Got guys for breakers, local card shops, you need supplies. Honestly, that's been one of the tools we've been trying to push, because it takes away a lot of because it is overwhelming, right? You walk in here, you're like, man, so I've got something, and then it's like the conundrum. I have no idea what it's worth.
Yes.
I can't ask the card shop owner because he's going to tell me it's $20 and he's going to buy it from me, and then he's going to sell it for $2,000. So it's it's been a great outlet, and then that's kind of the Facebook group and the website are the two things we really push, because I think it's the best forum to get information out.
Yeah, and that was the thing, because you were saying that you had like services on the website, so I was like, okay, that's on my list of things I need to research as I get deeper and deeper, but it's almost like I didn't feel like I was ready for it yet. I wanted to like familiarize, listen to your guys' podcast and kind of hear people that have been in the space and understand the space and get a little bit of a better understanding before I send stuff off. So
For sure. Yeah.
But
And even
yeah,
then, it's like, well, how do I know? Another thing's like, well, dude, I've got all these raw cards. How do I know guys aren't switching them out? I guarantee there are people who do that. Like, I'm sure there are. There's greed and corruption in every business, right? No matter what. So that's another reason I was like, I don't want to see people come back into the hobby and their first experience be them getting stiffed by somebody who's like, trying to scam or just trying to be a scumbag about it. So I thought, hey, yeah, it'll make more work for these guys on the front end, but you'll get more business out of it. So it works for the people on the site. And then these are guys I trust. So I was like, hey, it's kind of a win-win. So.
And I know you guys have been getting a ton of questions about grading, and how that works. And I've been, I've obviously been listening because Bill's even talked about it on his own podcast. Which, first of all, when you were on there, were you nervous at all? Because I mean, his audience is. I've been listening to his podcast for probably 10 years,
Right.
and so, and he's, I think like the 25th biggest podcast in the world. It's like, holy crap. Like, were you nervous at all to be on a platform that size?
Yeah, for sure, a little bit. I mean, especially at the beginning. And even just like with Bill, I'm just not used to dealing with people on that level. That's not somebody I would ever have a conversation with in real life if I weren't working for him. So there's definitely, and it's weird for me too. I've run my own businesses for years. Now I'm an employee, and I should be. Like, this dude is way more successful, smarter than me. No, whatever. I understand that. But it's still like this different. Yeah, and then being on there, I had no idea. So I signed in, you just click the link. Zoom link is what we use. And then literally he was just like, all right, you ready to go? Let's do this. And I was like, I had like a note. I literally had a notebook next to me. I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to be prepped for stuff or I had no clue. He's like, no, we're going to record. And I mean, I think you could tell by the tone of my voice I was nervous at the beginning. But after a few minutes, I felt more comfortable. Whether that came across or not, I don't know. But it was definitely nerve-wracking at the beginning.
Yeah, well, and it's crazy because I feel like he's such a good communicator that it probably, takes away some of the nerves right away.
Yeah, so like with our show, he came on, and we have like a format to a degree, although me and Jesse are not super specific, and I don't want it to be. I want some of it to be just react to this and be authentic.
Sure.
And when Bill came on, I was like, all right, so do you want to know? He's like, nah, let's go, hit the record button. And we just went, which I like. I really, I just think that's the best way. There's so many of these, again, the card space, you got guys on YouTube and guys on podcasts who do cards, and it's like, it's just a super produced, fake, I just don't think those things are authentic. And they're not entertaining to me either. Like some guy up there, like, just waving his hands like a moron. I just think it's I don't know, not for me. So with us, I just say, hey, we'll be authentic. Me and Jesse are best friends. People got upset when I would rag on him all the time. I was like, he's a foot taller than me. This is what we do. I rag on him, and then he reminds me he could crush me like a bug. This is our relationship. We're literally like, so I was like, we're not going to change that because people on YouTube don't like it. So I don't know. It seems to work.
I like it. Yeah, no, and I feel like the show is, it's weird to me that you say you're having trouble getting big because I feel like every time you have somebody, the CEO of PSA, of Gary Vee, Bill Simmons, like, geez, I feel like, you guys are coming into the space strong already. And I think from the reaction I've heard, because I live in the space where not that many people are really invested in cards. And I know a number of people that are getting into the card game now partially because they're listening to the pod.
Oh, nice. And honestly, and that was kind of the thing, right? It's a super niche market, cards, but it's like, well, so how do we make it appeal to sports fans? Because obviously the sports market is massive. And so we're still finding our way. I talked to Bill this morning because, again, I'm still finding what works, what doesn't work, and the ratings reflect that. Some weeks on the sports, because they do all the charts and stuff, one week will be 25. And it's like, well, why were we top 25 in the country that week? Oh, Gary Vee was on, Bill Simmons was on, and these were the topics. Like, cool. And then the next week it'll be like, hey, you're 107. And it's one of those things I'm slowly learning, like, hey, this is what the audience wants to hear, this is what they don't want to hear. These are the guests that have appeal. So definitely a learning curve for me.
Now, do you ever struggle with giving the audience what they want, but also staying true to like what you like and what you're about? You know what I mean?
I'm dumb. I go too far one way, man. That's an awesome question. I'm just a moron. I've been so self-sufficient in business for years now. that will get the same email about the same topic, right? 30 of them, 50 of them, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's a dumb topic. I'm not entertained by that, so I don't want to talk about it. But then I look, and Jesse will remind me, like, hey, had we talked about this, we would have gotten better. So especially at the beginning when I feel like when we're building the following, I think we need to try to play into it more. But that was the other thing that was appealing to me when we talked to the people at the Ringer, the sales staff, but also just Bill. It was like, hey, if you have people on, that's cool. But even like with Gary V, he's like, hey, when Gary comes on, it's still your show. You do your format. You do your thing. He can fit into that. And he did. He fit in perfect, right? But I think the point was if he comes on here and Gary wouldn't do this. I've seen him enough and we know him enough now. But if any guest, they just have a big personality and they have like this awesome social presence. If they want to come in and big time the show or just make dumb statements, basically Bill was pretty cool. He's like, you can go at him. You do what you want. You have pretty much free reign. He's been a huge help guiding us because I'm still learning the space.
Sure.
But, yeah, it's a balance, man. It's tough. And like I said, we've missed the mark. We've done like 15 shows. We've missed the mark on a bunch of the shows. So we're still learning. No question.
What's this is kind of a selfish question, but what's some advice that Bill's given you that you feel like has really helped improve your show or you as a host?
Yeah, so matter of fact, like an hour ago, I called him I had a question, but he dropped right in with, hey, I was listening and noticed X, Y, Z. So one of the constant things is, and I hated hearing this because everybody thinks they're the best at everything. At least I do. Like, I'm just competitive in business, right? Sure. So he was like, the last couple of shows, we were like super sports heavy at the beginning. And he's like, yeah, that's cool. You talked about NBA last week and MLB the week after and then the NBA. No one's listening to you to get like these official, like awesome sports takes. And he's right. Like Ryan Russillo's on the network. Simmons is on the network. Chris Vernon and Kevin O'Connell, all those guys know a million times more about on-court stuff than I'm ever going to know. Because I'm not that type of a sports guy.
Sure.
And so that reminder of, yeah, it's cute you have a take about the Boston Celtics playoff chances. Your niche, whatever, I never know how to say that word.
Yeah,
I will never pronounce
it.
Yeah, and I refuse to pronounce it correctly.
Sure.
But he was just like, stick to what you know. Yeah, yes, it's about cards. And so like today's episode, I feel like was one of the few times we hit the nail on the head, kind of. Hey, Drew Brees is retiring, huge news. We talked about it for a minute. But then, hey, get into the card side. So it was basically stay in your lane. Like find out what do you do that's good and that's unique, and then drive that home. And then the other thing was just like value. And actually we work with a guy too, Jeff Weiss, out in California. He's a huge social media presence. I mean, millions of followers, but for like family life stuff. But he was just a good dude. He came on super early in the project and was like, hey, I can help advise here and there. And that was his big thing too. And Bill says the same thing. They echo each other. Drive home value. So a guy like you, Kevin, who doesn't really care about sports cards all that much, it's like two things. Well, maybe there's a chance I can get in and make money doing this. And if not, can I at least listen and be entertained by it? So, he was like, hey, be authentic with your banter, like me and Jesse, and then add value to your listeners. So we've been trying to abide by that. And when we have done it, those shows have definitely done better.
Well, and that's kind of why I wanted to have you on today, because I know there's people my age, friends of mine, that are in the same situation that we've talked about it. We know the sports card market is hot. It's hot enough that it's in the mainstream and people are aware of it, but it's like, we don't know what to do with this stuff. So we kind of segued because I got in, you had some other stuff that spurred some other questions, but I kind of want to get back to the grading side of things. PSA, the gold standard. Yep. So, but I know they're overloaded and bogged down. Stuff's taking forever to get through. So my thought was, and I was looking at their pricing. I looked at their, and they were saying, so I have this, I don't know, I think it's an 87 Jordan All-Star. I'll show it to you in a little bit. Well, actually, here, let's see. I've got this guy here.
Okay.
And so, you were saying to check eBay, so I was looking around eBay and I was getting some different thoughts. I'm like, well, is this something that I send off to get graded? It's like, well, okay, if I do that, is this card potentially worth $200? Is it potentially worth $10,000? Because PSA tells you to submit that based on what it's worth. I don't know what it's worth. I have no idea whether that's a PSA 10 or PSA 2, so... So it's like, well, I don't know. So then it's like, well, maybe would it make more sense? What's the difference between if I went through Beckett, I could get it back faster? Like, does that matter? Is there that much of a difference? And with this HGA, it sounded like they're brand new. Is that correct?
Yeah, so HGA is brand new in the market within the last couple months.
It's like, is that what? So I guess I'm just kind of confused, and that's where, for me, I'm like, that's probably the place to start. But I just feel kind of overwhelmed by it. Like, what's the right path to take there?
Yeah, so honestly, not to give you like a watered down answer, that's why I use group sub guys. Those guys on the card service, because it's like, hey, fill out this paperwork. What's the card? What do you want to, how do you want to submit it and send it in? And if there's an issue, hey, you put value $4.99 or less. This could be a $10,000 card. Well, they're going to catch that before they submit it. It just lot of that. So
can you? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But what is a group? You said a group sub.
Yeah, so like the guys on our website, Card Services, you'll see 3 names: PC Sports Cards, Sappy Sports Cards, Walk-Off Submissions. Those guys run a business where you send them your cards, they'll prep them. Some of them do the paperwork as well. They fill everything out for you, and then they mail it off and submit it to PSA, to Beckett, and they do all the work for you. Then you get it back. And again, I just feel like it, because if you send something into PSA, to Beckett, to any of these companies, and it's miscategorized, for example, hey, this ultra modern card went in as a vintage card instead because you checked the wrong box. That stuff causes huge delays in your order. So I've actually never personally sent anything in. I always send to a middleman, one of those guys. They just do all the guesswork. It takes it out of the equation. So
then a couple things. Then I'm going to ask some dumb questions, is because I'm so new to the space.
Sure.
If I was sending cards to those guys, how do I even send them? Like, so they make sure they don't get damaged. Keep them in the sleeve? Do they need to be insured? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, just a general rule. Yeah, you always want to have it like in a protective sleeve, some sort of a hard plastic sleeve. And then one of the easiest things I tell people to do, cut out some cardboard, wrap it in some cardboard just to have some protection on the outside of it as well, and then put it in a bubble mailer. I mean, yeah, if you're sending them a Michael Jordan rookie that's potentially worth, $50,000, FedEx overnight the thing, it's going to cost you $1,000. Insure big packages, but in general, just ship it and just use your head. Pretty common, just some sort of protection around it, and then ship it in. And then a lot of those things too, you fill out a form right online. Hey, what's the year? What kind of service level? All that stuff is on all their websites.
Okay, because that was my other question. It's like, well, I don't know if these cards are worth sending, because I'm sure there's a fee for these middlemen, and then you're also paying a fee to, the grading companies. So it's like, well, is this stuff worth it? Like, how do you determine what you should and shouldn't send? Just looking at eBay?
Yeah, I mean, so eBay, 130 point. You can even look at the PSA registry and like what thing they track all their sales. So, for example, right now, for cheaper cards, to me, if a PSA 10 is selling for anything less than $100, it's not worth it. Because you're not getting the card back, even at the slowest level, the cheapest level, you're not getting it back for about a year right now. They're 10 to 12 months out on the low level. And then you got to think, with your grading fee, shipping back and forth, it's $30 to do that. So best case scenario, the card's worth $100 when it comes back. You've got $30 into it, a year of your time. To me, that's almost like the mark now, $80 to $100 at the bare minimum. And then you just got to be selective. Look at the card. Like if you, with your naked eye, can you see even the tiniest imperfection? Because if you can see it, then when it goes under a microscope, they're going to see that times 10. So you just got to be very selective with stuff.
Okay. And so just take the time, figure out which ones matter, and then send them to middleman. That would kind of be your recommendation.
That's what I do. Yeah, I find it works better. I find too, all their paperwork is always submitted correctly because that's what they do for a living. Most of those guys have data entry people. So when PSA gets it, it's getting processed faster anyways. They're not being given preferential treatment necessarily, but their orders don't need to be corrected, so they're not getting bounced around. So I feel like you save time that way anyways.
Okay. And is there any way, because I was watching Simmons unbox cards on his, I think it was on a story or something. I don't know.
His 1981 Topps. Yep, chasing that Larry Bird.
Yeah, and so, well, I thought it was 1990 stuff. It was...
you're talking about the David Robinson rookie.
Yeah, these guys. It was like these ones.
1989, 1990 hoops. Yep.
Yeah, so they were unboxing those, and there was two cards in there: the the Melendez rookie, and
Mm-hmm.
the Sam Vincent with Jordan having the 12 on there. And I was like, I think I have some of those, not in a sleeve. Had no idea they were worth anything. Is there like on your website? Do you guys have like a list of cards to look out for in specific years, or is there a place that exists?
We don't have that. Is there a place? There could be. I mean, general rule of thumb is the first thing you want to look for, who's the rookie in that year, you know. But yeah, like that Mark Jackson card you're talking about has the brothers in the background. What is it? The Menendez brothers?
Melendez.
Melendez.
Yeah,
Melendez.
yeah.
Yeah, the Killers.
Yeah.
That became this. That was probably about a year ago. That card took off. It was just like this weird social. People were like, "This is like a weird thing." They were in the background. eBay actually banned those sales for a while.
Oh, really? Wow.
I don't remember, just because they didn't like the content, like it was being
Yeah.
murder, memorabilia, whatever. Same thing with that Vincent card. Like people, all of a sudden, it became like a cool card. It's like, oh well, Jordan's wearing the wrong uniform because I think his uniform was stolen before that game.
Yeah, right.
So again, just became like this pop culture type thing, as much as it did a card thing. Because a lot of guys in the card hobby were like, yeah, who cares? But you had people outside of the hobby be like, oh, this is actually kind of neat. There's two, these brothers are in the background, or this dude's wearing a different jersey. I think that's what kind of fueled that. But as far as like, hey, what cards stand out in every set, I don't know specifically of like a list of just the iconic cards and sets.
Okay.
Baseline rookies, are going to be big. But
Okay. Interesting. And what about non-sports cards? Because I know you guys have kind of mentioned like some WWE. I was wondering. I have some Garbage Pail Kids. I don't know if you remember them from back in the day.
those are taking off now all of a sudden, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And obviously Pokemon is huge in the space right now too. But is there like are you guys going to talk about those more, or is that something you know that much about, or?
So I've just started messing around in the Pokemon space. We've got a card shop in Evansville. He's a buddy of mine on Facebook. So he sent me some Pokemon stuff. I was like, hey, wanted to help you out with some content for Facebook Live when I'm just going on there and ripping stuff. So I'm actually trying to get into the Pokemon space a little bit, just because it's definitely a different market, and there's value there. Like there was a box I think I paid. Actually, he sent them for free, but the suggested retail is like $90. And out of the first box, I pulled a Charizard card, a Charizard VMAX. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Dancing Dragon, man. But it sold for $350 that day on Facebook for me.
Wow.
So I'm trying to find, trying to put a little bit of work there. Also, the World Cup is, next November, I think? Someone just told me about this. The Euro Cup is this year. So soccer is something between me and Jesse and the intern. We'll have to start doing some work. It's obviously here to stay. Soccer's crazy hot. We need to learn more about it.
Are those cards that you should get graded? So if I have Garbage Pail Kids cards and WWE cards, are those cards that I should look to get graded too, or?
Yeah, so same thing, even Pokemon. Like if Pokemon cards sell for $100 raw, well that PSA 10 probably sells for $400, $500, $600. Same with Garbage Pail starting to catch on. It was definitely a little slower than the other stuff, but there's a big market for it now. Hulk Hogan, Jesse one week was talking about this Hulk Hogan card that in the matter of a month went from like $50 to hundreds of dollars.
Yeah, they called it like his rookie card, right? The Hulk Hogan rookie.
Yeah. I never would have guessed, never would have thought that. But yeah, anything in the card space now, if it's graded, it's just worth more.
Okay. And Simmons was talking about, I think it was the when you were on his pod, he was talking about the different bubbles that had happened in the space, or the booms. And this one, I mean, because the first one that he was talking about was when I was a kid. He's a little bit older than me. I kind of fit right in between you two as far as age-wise. So it was happening, but I was a kid, so I wasn't really that aware of what was going on. With this one, is there any difference that you can see between this hot market and when it's been hot in the past?
Yeah, so a couple differences, right? So like the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, there was that wicked bust. Just everything was mass-produced, So a couple things. First of all, back then you had a few different brands. That was it. So if you overproduced a card, there was just too many of that one card. There were no parallels. There were no autographs in packs. And then something else, too, like if me or you, Kevin, had 50 of the same card as a kid, Okay, so I only have $20 a month as an allowance to spend on cards. Well, so if I buy $20 worth of cards and get nothing, like where do I sell them? Or even if you hit something valuable, what do I do with those? Again, you go back to the card shop maybe, or you try to go to a card shop, a card show. No selling market back then. So now it's like you'll go to a card show now, there'll be 10-year-olds walking around with their parents. Dude's got $5,000 worth of cards, and he knows 20 different places to sell them. Right? Like these 10, 12, 15-year-old kids, obviously the adults and all of us have all this too, but even young dudes in the hustle now. Yeah, I'll go to eBay. If I can't get what I want on eBay, I'll go to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Like, they'll go to different forums. So it's just become something you can sell anywhere you want. And then the other thing, social media has made the whole world accessible now. Like, you want to get a hold of anybody. Like, I don't even know 10 years ago or 20 years ago, how would I have got a hold of Bill Simmons or Gary Vee? Like, write them a letter? Try to get a phone number, like like now, dude. Now you just start blowing up people's DMs. You can get a hold of anybody anywhere because the world's become a smaller place because of technology. So that helps. Now that it's super easy to sell, you can also be a competitive buyer. And then to me, the biggest thing, every time there's been a boom in the market before, when have you ever seen like frontline celebrities getting behind it?
Right.
Like in the early 90s, I don't remember Tom Cruise holding up a baseball card, or like, I'm trying to think who else was big in the early 90s. Like Ken Griffey Jr. wasn't like excited about it. Now you get like NBA players talking about Top Shot. You get Gary Vee talking about baseball cards. Giannis has a multi-million-dollar collection. Stuff like that. Deshaun Watson just bought a card for $50,000. I just feel like now we're Logan Paul. I still don't have any idea what that dude even does. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why. But he has more social control than you or me combined times 1,000.
Yeah, huge.
And these guys are telling you, hey, this stuff's cool. So, and when they say it, everybody listens.
And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you about with Gary Vee, because I heard you were ranting on the fact that you were upset that people were calling him like Nostradamus because he was, but basically he was, pumping the market by, if he promotes something, it's going to get hot.
Right.
But I know he's a real one. He's been in the game. He stayed in the game from the time he was a kid. So what do you think the impact specifically of him, besides the fact that he can, bolster his KDs when he puts them up, but what's been the overall impact? Because he's been talking about the market I consume a ton of his content. I would say the last 3 years, he started talking about sports cards before it got. I feel like it's hot right now. Like it's red hot. But
yeah, like never before.
Like the last 2.5 years ago, it wasn't this hot. But he was talking about it. So what do you think his impact on the market has been?
Yeah, I think he's been one of the foremost voices for the hobby, right? Like I mentioned, Simmons has a collection that probably rivals just about anybody. But and Bill's talked about it a little bit here and there, but Gary, and again, social media. When you think of people on social media who have influence of dollars, I would think Gary's right there with anybody. I mean, he says, hey, this is a good deal, go buy it. Like 3, 4, 5 years ago, how many people started doing garage sale stuff because of him? Like they're going house to house.
Right.
Like if I go on there and say, hey, go, dude, go hit up flea markets. Like, no, what is this dude talking about? But Gary Vee says it, and then it's all of a sudden there's that track record, right? Like, hey, he told me to go to Walmart and start scanning SKUs and selling on Amazon. That worked. He told me to start garage sailing. I started making money there. I started getting stuff on Craigslist on the free ads. So then it was like, okay, so his next thing, he's got all this credibility, a huge platform, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, so if this is working for him and he's putting his money. And another thing I think sets him apart, he puts money into it. I'm always happy, like I have some financial advisors in my life and in my different businesses, and that's cool. I'm always going to take the word of somebody who's intelligent and has their own money on the line over somebody else. You could tell me baseball cards are great and have all the research to show it. But if you come at me with, hey, here's 100,000, 500,000 of my own dollars tied up, that's how confident I am. Now it's like, okay, dude always makes money. He's putting his own money up here. It makes sense. The flip side of that, though, and it did start to annoy me because guys would be like, hey, Gary Vee said this and he was right, and he said this. Okay, so now the flip side is anything he holds up is going to trend. And I wasn't so much a criticism of him, more his like the lackeys who reach out his little
Sure.
following. It was like,
Sure.
oh, he was right again. Yeah, because he sets the market. Like,
Yeah.
I just feel like if the CEO of McDonald's like, hey, we're launching a new hamburger, and then tomorrow they do it, he's not smart. He just controls that market.
Right. Right.
KD cards are going to spike. Right. You took a picture with him. What I'd be more impressed with if you told me KD was going to spike and then and recorded it and played it a month later. Show me where he's at a month later without your influence. So that, I did get irritated with his following because they started reaching out a little bit. But
Now, how long does when he does that? How long does his impact? How long does that last on like the KD cards? You said it trends. Is that like a 24-hour trend? Does it last a month? Like,
yeah, some of it's quick. Like for example, one of the guys he pumped up was Sam, and I say pump. One of the guys he was high on himself was Sam Darnold. Darnold just didn't take off. So it's when you get that perfect storm. KD is somebody, and again, this isn't to compare because there is no comparison, but months before he said anything about KD, I went out and bought 80 KD cards. Me and Jesse talked about that on our show. I just put up $40,000 of my own dollars to this one card. Every card's the same, bought 80 of them. No one cared because I'm a nobody in the hobby, which is fine. But it's like, so people were already high on KD, myself and others I know in the circle. And again, we're not Gary Vee, but between me and 5 or 6 of my closest buddies, we're probably spending a couple million a year in sports cards easily, in the buying, selling, and all that. So guys were already high on KD. He was injured, so he was coming back from a low point because injured, nobody cared about him. He signs and has this huge deal with Brooklyn where people are psyched about him and Kyrie playing together.
yeah.
And then an influencer talks about him. So it's like he wasn't the start of the ball. It's like this thing's already rolling, and now cherry on top, this huge social media giant is talking about him as well. So the KD trend, it's still hot. Honestly, KD stuff is still trending up. But if you swing and miss, if you tell us some stiff is going to be great, people are going to buy it for a day or two. But if the dude comes out and shoots, 1 for 11 and scores 2 points, you're not influencing that market anymore.
Yeah, and you were talking about some Luka cards and how how quickly does the market shift? Because I don't remember, it might have been you guys talking about vintage and how those guys, what Barkley did over his career. So it's to me that seems like a safer bet because it's like, okay, I already know Tim Duncan was amazing, but with Luka the market fluctuates. Like Tyler Hero got hot in the bubble, and so he was huge, like more expensive than a bunch of these other Hall of Famers. But how quickly does the market shift? How volatile is the market on that stuff? So if Luka plays bad for 2 games, does it impact the value drastically, or how does that work?
Yeah, so a couple things are drastic. Injury, Joel Embiid getting injured, his stuff dropped about 20% immediately. Now, when it came out that it wasn't season ending, 15, 20% loss, kind of stayed steady. Drew Brees retiring, instant bump of, honestly, about, from what our numbers showed in our show today, about 40% of a jump because people are crazy high on him all of a sudden. Luka, regular season, usually you need about a week. If you have a week where you really go off and average a triple-double, okay. But in the playoffs, way shorter window. He hits that game-winning step-back 3 against the Clippers last year. Dude, his stuff went that night from about 15 to 1,600 for his Prism rookie to $2,000 immediately. So some of that's immediate. It never used to be like that with vintage, though. Vintage used to be like, well, just buy in. You're not going to get rich, but it's the mutual fund, right? So if you buy $1,000 worth of Dunkins, next year it's worth $10.50. The year after it's worth $11. What's been crazy is now we're seeing those cards go crazy where you can get hurt buying vintage. Duncan cards jumped as high as $5,500 from $200 over the course of 2 years. Literally a $200 card, $5,000 at the peak. But now it's down to $3,500. So you can get crushed in that market. You just got to be careful.
Yeah. And is that because there's so many more buyers in, and so the prices are jumping because it's kind of supply and demand? Is that sort of...
Definitely, yeah. So supply demand for sure. You definitely have more buyers now than ever, more attention now than ever. And then guys are just kind of looking at it like you just said. Yeah, Luka's cool, and maybe he goes down to be great. Duncan's top 10 right now established. Forget spending this on Luka. I'm just going to go buy this Duncan card. And then enough guys do that, and all of a sudden it just starts this trend. And then the bubble bursts, so to speak. But the misconception is, the bubble bursts and everything's back to normal. That $200 card 2 years ago of Duncan, for example, is still $3,000 right now. Yes, it peaked at $5,000, but the return over time, the numbers are still unbelievable based on what's happened. So even when guys hit that valley now, it's still higher than the peak ever was.
And that was my question, kind of. So we were talking about the volatility, but like, so take that Drew Brees example. So he retires. You say there's an immediate 40% bump. Is that like the new norm for that card, or will that drop back down eventually too? Or, I mean, how do people time how if say I had 20 Drew Breeses, would this be the time to sell? Do I have to wait till he dies? Like he gets inducted in the Hall of Fame? Like how do I gauge when the right time to sell is?
Sure. Yeah, so for selling, there's a couple different things. One thing is you take your wins when you can get them. That's just my philosophy in selling. Okay. I sold a ton of Brady stuff after the Seattle Super Bowl and tripled my money and was awesome. Well, now, I mean, his stuff is probably up about 50x, his rare rookie stuff that I sold from then. So, yeah, I left a ton of money on the table if I were to hold it for all these years. But at the same time, I mean, like Drew Brees' earliest he'll go in the Hall of Fame is 5.5 years from now. What's the market look like then? What's the economy look like in 5.5 years? I have no idea.
Sure.
Neither does anybody else, right? So right now, they're at an all-time high for right now. I would sell every Drew Brees card under the sun. Okay. I think his stuff, because again, that 40% jump, I think you'll see that come back to I think it'll drop about half of what it's gained. Still be higher than it was before, but I think right now is like the ultimate peak for his stuff.
Okay. And you kind of alluded to this, but the collectible market in general, like Beanie Babies and stuff, eventually there's a collapse. But I feel like the card market is different, and this feels a little different to me because of how much money, like big investors, big firms are coming into this now. Is this something where even if it drops off a little bit, it's still going to be this stable commodity, basically? Is that sort of what you see happening, or is this something where companies will see how much they can make, overproduce cards like they did in the past, and flood the market again? Where do you see the market going?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certain cards to me that are just cemented. A Michael Jordan rookie card, I don't care what bubble bursts, a PSA 10 is not going to go from being 700,000 like it's now to being 25 like it used to be. That's just a thing of the past. A gallon of milk now costs, 20 times more than it cost 30 years ago. Sure. We've seen that same type of increase across the entire card market, just in a crazy condensed period of time. So eventually when things slow down? Yeah. I think when that starts to happen, which I think we're 2 or 3 years from that, honestly, at a minimum. But when it starts to slow down, I think you'll see a lot of modern stuff. Because, if you've got 2 cards in your hand, Kev, like, hey, I've got a Luke on one hand and I've got a Patrick Ewing on the other, and I have to sell one because I'm afraid of what it's going to do, you're not selling Ewing. He's a top 10 center of all time, top 50 player. Okay, I'm cool with the value here. Luka, I don't know if the whole thing collapses. Who cares about a 25-year-old kid? I feel like when we start to see the slowdown, we'll see it with the young guys and with the new stuff first. But I just don't think it's that close. And again, you got so many people, like you said, huge money guys. I'm not talking guys worth $1 million. I'm talking guys worth hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Like, when is the last time you saw a collective group of multi-millionaires just get murdered because they made a bad business decision?
Yeah.
Doesn't happen. There's
Bets,
a reason.
Maybe.
What's that?
Wall Street bets for the GameStop stock, maybe that. But
sure, yeah, and even that, like, that was like an impulse thing. It wasn't like guys making this educated decision where they're, So I just feel like the guys in it now are educated, smart buyers who are projecting this market to be successful. Cuban is involved millions of dollars into the card market now. I don't think Cuban's dumping millions because he thinks it's going to be a 6-month window.
Right. Yeah, so do you see it as being like, because I feel like a lot of people are seeing it now as like an investment, just like stocks, just like anything else.
Absolutely.
Do you see it being able to sustain that over the course of the next 20, 30 years?
I think it's indicative of what does the market do. What is the market? What's the economy doing? If things are still well and we're still seeing highs on, in the stock market and people are working and making money, then yeah, I think you're going to see this commodity market stay hot. Because, why not? If you don't need the money, you're not going to sell things that you view as collectibles and view as pieces of art. You're going to keep them, and there's always going to have that demand there for them.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess the final question, so I have some friends that are like really into the new stuff. They're trying to figure out like when the vendors stock the cards and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
it seems like to me though, like I went and got a couple cards when they're like, hey, come get in, but it felt kind of dirty to me. Is there any like that side of it seemed like I really like the vintage stuff. I think it's cool, but like and I don't really know what the question is. I guess I just want to know like is there like a dark side to the card market? Because I mean, I got out of there and I felt kind of dirty. I was like, I don't want to do
Yeah.
that again.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I mean, and that's not my thing. I have again, the LLC was set up where we buy direct from distributors for hobby product. The stuff you're talking about, like the people stocking the shelves at Target or Walmart, the retailers, it's called retail product. Same product, but it's a different SKU, so it's a different configuration, and it's made to be cheaper. You know, you can go to Walmart and buy a $20 box of cards. Well, what happened is, like everything else, hobby boxes that are sold like in a card shop, you know, that guy was buying for